The rumble of Harley-Davidson engines cut through the October night like thunder across distant plains. 5 motorcycles carved their path along Interstate 40, headlights piercing the darkness as they roared eastward. The men who rode them carried decades of stories etched into their weathered faces, their leather cuts bearing the emblem of the Iron Eagles Motorcycle Club. At their lead rode Frank "Iron" Calloway, his tall frame silhouetted against the midnight sky. 62 years had turned his beard silver, but time had done nothing to diminish the intensity in his eyes. Those same eyes had once scanned Vietnamese jungles for enemy movement, had witnessed both the worst and best of humanity. Now they focused on the highway stretching before him, guiding his brothers home from the Veterans Memorial Ride in Nashville. The night embraced them, cold October air rushing past as they thundered through the darkness. There was freedom here on the open road that Calloway had never found anywhere else, not in the corporate world that had rejected men like him, not in a society that looked at their leather and tattoos and saw only threat, never the honor and loyalty beneath. The dashboard clock on his Harley read 2:17 a.m. when Calloway signaled the turn into the Fastway gas station just off the interstate. The place stood as an island of harsh fluorescent light in the surrounding darkness, its red and blue neon sign flickering like a distress signal. They needed fuel to make the remaining 90 miles home, and his old bones could use a stretch. 5 motorcycles pulled into the station's concrete lot, engines quieting to idle before shutting down completely. Calloway dismounted first, his boots hitting the ground with practiced precision. He arched his back, feeling the familiar protest of vertebrae damaged in a helicopter crash during his final tour. Some wounds never fully healed, only transformed into constant companions. "Fill 'em up, boys," Calloway ordered, his voice carrying the gravel of years of road dust and cigarettes. "We've still got 90 to go." Around him, the Iron Eagles moved with the coordinated precision of men who had ridden together for decades. Doc Murphy, 59, former Army medic with hands that had saved countless lives, now headed inside for coffee. His medical bag never left his motorcycle, always ready to patch up brothers or strangers in need. Hammer Rodriguez slid off his bike, immediately checking the fuel gauge. At 58, the former mechanic could diagnose an engine problem just by listening to its rhythm. 3 tours in Desert Storm had taught him that proper maintenance was often the difference between life and death. Bear Thompson, the oldest at 65, stayed by his bike, massive frame belying the gentleness in his eyes. The former police officer had joined the Eagles after losing his wife to cancer 7 years ago, finding in the brotherhood the family he'd lost. Ghost Wilkins moved silently to check tire pressure, his 56-year-old frame still carrying the stealth that had made him an exceptional scout in his military days. He spoke little but missed nothing. They were men from another time, carriers of values that the modern world often dismissed as outdated: honor, sacrifice, brotherhood. Standing against evil, not for recognition or social media likes, but because it was what men were supposed to do. None of them could have known that this routine stop would become the moment when those old-fashioned values would be needed most. "Frank," it was Doc's voice that sliced through the night, sharp, urgent, not his usual tone. Calloway turned, following Doc's gaze. The medic wasn't looking at him, but staring intently at a battered white cargo van parked 3 pumps away. The engine was running, windows tinted dark, but the rear window, the darkest one, had something pressed against it. A small, pale hand. Calloway's blood ran cold as he moved toward the van. Behind that hand was a face, a child's face. A girl no more than 8, her eyes wide with terror, mascara streaked down her cheeks from crying. Her mouth moved deliberately, forming 2 words over and over: "Help me." Then she pressed a crumpled piece of notebook paper against the window. Scrawled in shaky crayon letters were the words: "Help, kidnapped." For 3 eternal seconds, nobody moved. Then Calloway's instincts, honed from 20 years as a Marine and 15 as a club president, kicked into overdrive. "Ghost, get behind that van now, block the exit." His voice dropped to ice-cold command. "Bear, call 911. Doc, keep eyes on that window, Hammer." But Hammer was already inside the gas station, watching the register. A man stood at the counter, 40s, greasy hair, stained jacket, nervous energy radiating from every movement. He kept glancing toward the van while the cashier processed his credit card. His right hand never left his jacket pocket. Hammer's jaw clenched. This was him, the kidnapper. Inside the van, 8-year-old Lisa Mitchell's heart hammered so hard she thought it might explode. She'd been in this nightmare for 6 hours now, ever since the man grabbed her from the playground near her grandmother's house in Memphis. He'd told her if she screamed, if she tried to run, he'd hurt her mother. He'd shown her a knife. He'd shown her photos of her house. But now, these people on motorcycles had seen her. The tough-looking woman with the red bandana had locked eyes with her. The massive bearded man was on the phone, and the tallest one, the one with the scary skull vest, was walking slowly toward the van. Lisa's hands shook. Was this hope or something worse? Calloway approached the van like a predator circling prey. Calm, calculated. His boots crunched on the gravel. He circled to the driver's side, peering through the tinted windshield. Empty. He moved to the side door. Locked. Then he saw her through a gap in the window tint. He saw the little girl, no older than his own granddaughter, zip-tied to a metal bar welded inside the van. Her wrists were raw and bleeding. Her face was swollen from crying. She wore a pink jacket with unicorns on it. Calloway's fists clenched so hard his knuckles cracked. His mind flashed back to Quang Tri Province, 1975. Another child with terrified eyes. Another rescue mission. That one had ended in tragedy, a wound he'd carried for 50 years. Not this time. He tapped the window gently. The girl flinched. "Hey, sweetheart," Calloway whispered through the glass, his voice suddenly soft, fatherly. "My name's Frank. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. You understand? Nod if you understand." Lisa nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Good girl. We're going to get you out. Just stay quiet for a few more minutes. Can you do that?" Another nod. Inside the station, the kidnapper, later identified as Raymond Getz, a convicted child trafficker with warrants in 4 states, finally got his credit card back. He grabbed a pack of cigarettes and energy drinks and turned toward the door. Hammer stepped directly into his path. "Excuse me, brother," Hammer said, his tone friendly, but his body language anything but. He was blocking the exit. "You dropped something." Getz's eyes narrowed. "I didn't drop nothing. Move." "I'm pretty sure you did." Hammer didn't move an inch. His 6-foot frame was pure muscle under that vest. Behind him, the cashier, a young woman named Tiffany, sensed the tension and quietly reached for the panic button under the counter. Outside, Ghost had positioned his bike directly behind the van's rear bumper. Bear was on the phone with 911. "Yeah, we got a possible kidnapping situation. White cargo van, license plate Tango Hotel 7429, child visible in the back, restrained. Male suspect inside the building. We're at the Fastway Gas on mile marker 213, I-40 eastbound. Sir, officers are en route, ETA 6 minutes. Do not approach the suspect." "Too late for that, ma'am," Bear said, watching Hammer block the door. "Just get here fast." Inside, Getz's hand moved toward his jacket pocket. Hammer saw it. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, brother," Hammer said, his voice dropping an octave. "There's 5 of us out there. 1 of you. And we don't take kindly to people who hurt kids." Getz's eyes darted to the window. He saw them now, the other bikers surrounding his van like wolves around prey. The big one blocking his escape route, the woman standing guard by the side door. His van was boxed in. Getz's phone vibrated. A text message from a contact named Kay. The message chilled him to the bone. "Situation compromised, clean up all traces, no witnesses." Getz knew what that meant. Victor Crane, his boss, was cutting ties. Lisa Mitchell was no longer just a package for delivery. She was evidence to be eliminated. His face twisted with panic and rage. His hand flew out of his jacket pocket, not with a weapon, but making a desperate grab for the door. Hammer grabbed his wrist, twisting it behind his back in one fluid motion. "You're not going anywhere, you sick bastard," Hammer growled. The gas station attendant had already called the police. The manager, a woman named Sarah, rushed out from behind the counter with zip ties, the same kind of restraints Getz had used on Lisa. Within seconds, they had him on the ground, hands secured behind his back. Outside, the tension was electric. Calloway kept one hand on the van, speaking in a steady, reassuring voice through the gap in the window. Help is coming, sweetheart. Police are on their way. You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you, I promise. Lisa's body shook with silent sobs. She'd been terrified for 6 hours straight. 6 hours of not knowing if she'd ever see her mother again. And now these scary-looking people with the tattoos and leather vests were her lifeline. Inside the van, Lisa suddenly saw two men approaching from across the parking lot. They weren't police officers. They moved with purpose, hands inside their jackets. Lisa had seen enough crime shows to know what that meant. Something inside her screamed danger. "Mister," she whispered urgently to Calloway, "two men coming. They look mean." Calloway's instincts flared. He caught Doc's eye and nodded slightly toward the approaching figures. Doc turned, his medical bag in hand, but his posture changing subtly from healer to fighter. Marcus Blake and Tyler Reed, professional cleaners on Crane's payroll, assessed the situation quickly. Their assignment had been simple: ensure no witnesses, but they hadn't expected a group of bikers. Blake, the senior cleaner with 22 successful cleanups behind him, recognized trouble when he saw it. "We've got complications," Blake muttered to Reed. "Armed intervention required." As their hands moved inside their jackets, the sound of police sirens approached rapidly, growing louder. Calloway heard them too. His military training kicked in, calculating distances, timing, trajectories. "Bear," Calloway called out quietly. "Company, 3 o'clock." Bear turned, his former police training immediately recognizing the threat. He moved his large frame between the approaching men and the van, one hand reaching under his vest. "Ghost," Calloway continued. "Stay with the girl." The threat assessment played out in seconds. Blake and Reed hesitated, hearing the approaching sirens, seeing the coordinated movements of the bikers. Professional killers recognize professional opposition. These weren't just weekend warriors in leather costumes. These were men who had seen combat. Blake made a rapid decision, nodding to Reed. They turned, walking casually back to their dark sedan. This cleanup would have to wait for another opportunity. The situation had too many witnesses now. "They're leaving," Bear reported, keeping his eyes on the retreating figures. "For now," Calloway added, watching them slide into their vehicle. He memorized the license plate, a habit from his intelligence-gathering days. Something told him this wasn't over. Two police cars screeched into the gas station parking lot, officers jumping out, weapons drawn, moving into tactical formation. Calloway held his hands up, backing away from the van to show he was cooperating. "We got a kidnapped child in that van," Calloway shouted. "Suspect is on the ground inside the station. We secured him. Child needs immediate medical attention. She's been in there 6 hours." The lead officer, Detective Maria Sanchez, a 15-year veteran with 2 kids of her own, nodded sharply. "Good work. Step back. We got it from here." Within minutes, the van was opened by emergency medical technicians. Lisa's little face appeared in the opening, swollen from crying, traumatized, but alive. "Hello, sweetheart. My name's Officer Thompson. You are safe now. Your mom's going to be here really soon. I promise," the female officer said gently, carefully removing the zip ties from Lisa's wrists. As they lifted the terrified girl into the ambulance, Lisa looked back at the bikers, at Calloway, standing there with his leather vest and gray beard, at Doc with his medical bag at the ready, at Hammer with his massive arms crossed, at Ghost and Bear. Her eyes locked with Calloway's for one final moment, and then she was gone. Off to the hospital, off to safety, off to her mother. But as the ambulance pulled away, Calloway couldn't shake the feeling that they'd stepped into something bigger than a single kidnapping. The men who'd approached and retreated, the text message Getz had received according to Hammer, the professional way the van had been modified for transport. This wasn't the work of a lone predator. Catherine Kate Mitchell had been working the night shift at Memphis General Hospital when she got the call. Her 8-year-old daughter, missing for 6 hours, had been found at a gas station off Interstate 40. The police officer's words blurred as panic and relief collided in her mind. "Is she hurt? Is she okay?" Kate demanded, already grabbing her purse, her nurse's training battling with maternal terror. "She's dehydrated and has some abrasions on her wrists, but physically she appears stable," the officer assured her. "She's en route to your hospital now." Kate ran through the hospital corridors. Her world narrowed to a single focus: reaching her daughter. The past 6 hours had been hell, starting with the frantic call from her mother that Lisa had vanished from the playground. The police report, the waiting, the praying, the imagining of horrors no parent should ever have to contemplate. As she burst through the emergency room doors, the ambulance was just arriving. Kate stood frozen as the EMTs unloaded the stretcher, catching her first glimpse of her daughter, small and fragile under the blankets, an IV in her arm. "Lisa!" Kate cried, rushing forward. Lisa's head turned, her eyes finding her mother. "Mommy!" The girl's arms reached out as Kate enfolded her daughter in an embrace that sought to erase the nightmare of separation. "I was so scared," Lisa sobbed into her mother's scrubs. "The man said he'd hurt you if I yelled." "You're safe now," Kate whispered, stroking her daughter's hair, feeling the miracle of her child's heartbeat against her chest. "You're safe." After the initial medical assessment confirmed Lisa was physically stable, Detective Sanchez approached for a gentle preliminary interview, Kate never leaving her daughter's side. "Lisa, you're being very brave," Sanchez said softly. "Can you tell me what happened?" Through tears and stops and starts, Lisa recounted how a man approached her at the playground, claiming Kate had been in an accident, how he'd shown her photos of their house and threatened to hurt her mother if she didn't come quietly, how he'd tied her hands in the van and talked on the phone about delivering her to someone in Kentucky. "He said I was special because I looked like the pictures," Lisa whispered, a detail that made Detective Sanchez's eyebrows raise slightly. "And then these motorcycle people found me," Lisa continued, her voice strengthening. "The old man with this white beard talked to me. He promised he'd save me, and he did." 3 hours later, the Iron Eagles were sitting in the police station's interrogation room, giving their statements to Detective Sanchez. They'd been there since 3 o'clock a.m., recounting every detail, every decision, every second of the rescue. "You took an enormous risk," Detective Sanchez said, not unkindly. "If he'd reached for a weapon instead of the door, this could have gone very differently." "We know," Calloway said quietly, "but we couldn't just watch." Detective Sanchez set down her pen. "I want you to know something. Raymond Getz is a convicted child trafficker. He has warrants in Tennessee, Kentucky, Louisiana, and Georgia for kidnapping 5 other children over the last 8 years. 5 children we know of." She paused, studying the men across from her. "And there's one we're still looking for. A boy named Jason Reynolds, abducted in Memphis 3 months ago." Calloway and the crew exchanged looks. Their decision to block that van, to confront Getz, to act, had prevented what could have been a lifetime of trauma for Lisa and possibly revealed the location of another missing child. "There's more," Sanchez continued, her voice dropping. "Getz isn't working alone. His phone records show communication with a contact we believe is Victor Crane, a prominent banker and philanthropist in Memphis. We've suspected Crane's involvement in a trafficking ring for years, but haven't been able to get enough evidence for a warrant." "Banker and philanthropist," Calloway repeated, disgust evident in his tone. "The worst monsters always wear the nicest suits." "Lisa's mother is here," Detective Sanchez continued. "She's been informed that her daughter is safe. She's asking to thank you." Within minutes, a woman in her early 40s with Lisa's same brown eyes rushed into the room, tears streaming down her face. Her name was Catherine Mitchell. "Thank you," she choked out, her voice breaking. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't seen her, I don't know what I would have done. I don't." She broke down, and Calloway, this tough tattooed biker president, stood up and held her while she cried. "Your daughter is incredibly brave," Doc said softly. "She was smart and quick thinking. She wrote that sign. She pressed it against the window. She did everything right." "She asked about you," Catherine said, wiping her eyes. "She asked about the nice bikers. That's what she kept saying. The nice bikers saved me." When Catherine had composed herself, Detective Sanchez escorted her back to the hospital, leaving the Iron Eagles to finish their statements. As they prepared to leave, Sanchez pulled Calloway aside. "We're going to increase security at the hospital," she said quietly. "Those 2 men you reported seeing at the gas station concern me. If Getz was communicating with Crane and Crane sent cleaners—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Calloway understood the implication perfectly. Lisa was no longer just a victim. She was a witness who could potentially identify Victor Crane. And men like Crane didn't leave witnesses. "We'll take shifts," Calloway said without hesitation. "Outside her room, until you catch this Crane character." Sanchez studied him for a long moment. "You know that's not protocol. I can't officially sanction civilians providing security." Calloway's weathered face broke into a rare smile. "With all due respect, Detective, when have men like us ever waited for official sanction to do what's right?" A ghost of a smile crossed her professional facade. "I'll make sure the officers on duty know you're friendlies." Dawn was breaking as the Iron Eagles mounted their motorcycles outside the police station. The events of the night had changed everything. What should have been a simple ride home had become the first chapter in what all of them sensed would be a much longer story. "Hospital?" Ghost asked simply. Calloway nodded, starting his engine. "First shift's mine. The rest of you go home. Get some sleep. We'll rotate every 6 hours." As they rode through the morning light toward Memphis General, Calloway's mind traveled back 50 years to another rescue, another child. Lan, the Vietnamese girl he couldn't save during the fall of Saigon. Her face had haunted his dreams for decades. Perhaps this was his second chance. Perhaps Lisa Mitchell was his opportunity to finally put those ghosts to rest. What none of them realized yet was that Victor Crane's operation extended far beyond Memphis. The banker sat in his penthouse office, watching the sunrise as he received the report from his failed cleaners. "The girl is alive. She's at Memphis General. And she's got protection. Bikers from some club called the Iron Eagles," Blake reported over the secure line. Crane's manicured fingers tapped his mahogany desk. In his three-piece suit and with his philanthropist smile, no one would ever connect him to the trafficking of children. That was by design. He'd spent decades building his public image, donating millions to children's charities while secretly profiting from the very evil he claimed to fight. "Find out everything about these bikers," Crane instructed. "Everyone has vulnerabilities. Find theirs." He hung up and swiveled his chair to face the wall of awards and photographs documenting his humanitarian work. His eyes lingered on a picture of himself cutting the ribbon at the Victor Crane Children's Honor, the mayor of Memphis at his side, beaming approval. It was the perfect cover. Who would suspect the man who built shelters for abused children was himself the architect of their suffering? But now a complication had arisen. An 8-year-old girl who could identify him, and a group of aging bikers who, for some unfathomable reason, had appointed themselves her guardians. Crane reached for his phone, dialing a number few people possessed. "Judge Wilson, it's Crane. We have a situation that requires your assistance. A legal matter concerning a child witness." As the sun climbed higher over Memphis, the pieces were moving into position. Crane activating his network of corrupted officials. The police gathering evidence against Getz. Lisa Mitchell recovering in a hospital room with her mother at her side and a grizzled biker standing guard outside her door. And somewhere in Kentucky, in a converted warehouse, 10-year-old Jason Reynolds and 5 other children waited, unaware that their fate now hinged on the unfolding events set in motion at a gas station in the middle of the night. The battle lines were drawn. On one side, a powerful trafficking network with resources, influence, and ruthless determination. On the other, 5 aging veterans who believed that some values never went out of style, that protecting the innocent wasn't a choice but a duty. Men from another time, called to stand against the darkness of this one. Memphis General Hospital stood sentinel against the brightening sky, its windows reflecting the orange glow of sunrise. Inside room 412 of the pediatric ward, Lisa Mitchell slept fitfully, her small body finally succumbing to exhaustion after the trauma of the previous night. Catherine Mitchell sat beside her daughter's bed, her nurse's fingers gently stroking Lisa's hair, her eyes never leaving the child's face as if afraid she might disappear again. Outside the door, Frank Calloway maintained his vigil. His imposing frame filled the plastic hospital chair, leather cuts still on despite the sterile surroundings. Nurses passing by cast curious glances at the weathered biker, some wary, others appreciative of his protective presence. He acknowledged them with silent nods, his focus never wavering from his self-appointed mission. Detective Maria Sanchez approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Calloway without comment, then leaned against the wall beside him. "You look like you could use this," she said finally, "and some sleep." Calloway accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. "Sleep's overrated. Had plenty in the ground someday." Sanchez studied him, professional curiosity mixing with genuine interest. Vietnam? 30 years Marine Corps. Last tour in Saigon, 75. He sipped the coffee, grimacing at its bitterness. This almost makes me miss military coffee. Almost. A ghost of a smile crossed Sanchez's face before she returned to business. We've got officers posted at all hospital entrances. Getz is in custody, refusing to talk beyond initial processing. His phone shows regular communication with the numbers we believe connect to Victor Crane, but nothing explicit enough for a warrant. Men like Crane don't leave paper trails, Calloway observed. They leave bodies. Which is why I'm concerned about those two men you reported seeing at the gas station. Sanchez lowered her voice. If they were Crane's cleaners, they'll try again. Lisa is the only witness who could potentially place Crane in connection with these kidnappings. Calloway's weathered face hardened. They'll have to go through me first. And the Memphis PD, Sanchez added firmly. This isn't just your fight, Mr. Calloway. With all due respect, Detective, men like Crane have resources. They have people everywhere, cops, judges, politicians. You don't get as rich as he is playing by the rules. Calloway's eyes met hers. Can you guarantee everyone in your department is clean? The momentary hesitation in her response told him everything. I trust my immediate team, she said finally. That's what I thought. Calloway drained his coffee. The Iron Eagles stay. Inside the room, Lisa stirred in her sleep, a small whimper escaping her lips. Catherine's head snapped up, instantly alert. She watched as Lisa's eyes fluttered open, momentary panic giving way to relief as the girl recognized her surroundings. Mommy? Lisa's voice was small, fragile. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Catherine leaned forward, embracing her daughter gently, mindful of the IV line. Is the biker man still here? Lisa asked, her eyes moving to the door. Catherine smiled. Mr. Calloway? Yes, he's right outside. He and his friends have been taking turns watching over you. Lisa nodded, seeming satisfied. He promised he'd keep me safe. He has kind eyes, even though he looks scary. Would you like to see him? Catherine asked. When Lisa nodded, Catherine moved to the door, opening it to find Calloway and Detective Sanchez in quiet conversation. She's awake, Catherine said softly. She's asking for you, Mr. Calloway. Calloway stood, his imposing frame filling the doorway. He removed his leather cap respectfully before entering, his movements deliberately gentle, as if trying to make himself less intimidating to the child in the bed. Hello, Lisa, he said, his gruff voice softened. How are you feeling this morning? Lisa studied him with the direct gaze that only children seem capable of, taking in the tattoos visible on his forearms, the gray beard, the leather cut with its Iron Eagles insignia. Better, she said finally. Thank you for saving me. Calloway moved to the side of the bed, carefully keeping a respectful distance. You saved yourself, young lady. That sign you made, it was very smart thinking. A hint of pride flickered across Lisa's face. My teacher said if something bad happens, leave clues so people can find you. Your teacher is very wise, Calloway said, glancing at Catherine. You should be proud of your daughter, Ms. Mitchell. She's got courage. Catherine nodded, tears threatening again. I am, more than I can say. She hesitated. Mr. Calloway, Detective Sanchez mentioned that the man who took Lisa might be connected to someone powerful. Is Lisa still in danger? Before Calloway could answer, his phone vibrated. He checked the screen, his expression darkening. Excuse me, he said, stepping back into the hallway. He answered with a terse, talk to me. We've got movement, Doc Murphy's voice came through clearly. Just spotted Blake and Reed entering the hospital through the south entrance. They're in orderly uniforms. Calloway's military training took over. Bear with you? Affirmative. Ghost is covering the elevators. Hammer's on his way up, the service stairs now. Hold positions. I'll alert Sanchez. Calloway ended the call, turning to find the detective already watching him with raised eyebrows. Your men? She asked. Blake and Reed are in the building, south entrance, dressed as orderlies. Sanchez's hand moved to her service weapon. How did they get past the officers? That's a question for later, Calloway said grimly. Right now, we need to move Lisa. They re-entered the room where Catherine was reading softly to Lisa from a children's book brought by one of the nurses. Ms. Mitchell, Sanchez said with calm urgency, we need to relocate Lisa immediately. There may be a security breach. Catherine's face drained of color. What? But I thought... No time to explain, Calloway interrupted. Can she be moved? Wheelchair? Gurney? Catherine's nurse training kicked in. Yes, her IV is mobile, but where... Different floor, different wing, Sanchez decided, already on her radio requesting backup. Somewhere not listed in her official records. As Catherine quickly disconnected Lisa from the monitoring equipment while keeping the IV intact, Calloway positioned himself at the door, peering out into the hallway. It remained quiet, but he knew that wouldn't last. Men like Blake and Reed wouldn't be deterred by a busy hospital environment. In fact, the chaos would provide perfect cover. Stay here, he instructed Sanchez. I'll clear a path. Without waiting for her response, Calloway stepped into the hallway and immediately spotted an empty wheelchair by the nurse's station. He retrieved it and returned to the room just as Catherine was helping Lisa sit up. Backup is 2 minutes out, Sanchez reported, holstering her radio. Where are your men positioned? Doc and Bear are near the south entrance. Ghost is watching the elevators. Hammer is coming up the service stairs to this floor. Calloway helped Catherine gently transfer Lisa to the wheelchair, IV bag, and all. What's the most secure area in this hospital? The surgical floor has restricted access, Catherine suggested. You need key cards to enter. Too obvious, Sanchez countered. They'll check there first if they're professionals. The basement level, Catherine said suddenly. There's an old record storage area that's barely used now that everything's digital. My friend Janine works down there. We could hide there until it's safe. Sanchez nodded. That works. We'll take the service elevator at the end of the hall. Calloway, you lead. I'll cover our rear. As they prepared to move, Lisa looked up at Calloway with wide eyes. Are the bad men coming back? Calloway met her gaze directly, knowing better than to lie to a child who had already seen too much evil. They might be trying, but they won't get to you, I promise. Lisa nodded solemnly. I believe you. The small procession moved into the hallway, Calloway in front, followed by Catherine pushing Lisa in the wheelchair, with Detective Sanchez bringing up the rear, her hand resting on her holstered weapon. They moved swiftly but calmly, trying not to draw attention. They were halfway to the service elevator when Calloway's phone vibrated again. He checked it without breaking stride. Ghost reports 2 orderlies matching Blake and Reed's description just exited the main elevator on this floor, moving toward room 412. We need to hurry, Sanchez urged, scanning the corridor behind them. They reached the service elevator, Calloway pressing the call button repeatedly. The digital display showed it was currently on the first floor, ascending slowly. Too slow, he muttered, locating the stairwell door adjacent to the elevator. Stairs, now. Catherine looked doubtful. Lisa can't manage stairs. Without hesitation, Calloway stepped forward. May I? He asked, gesturing to Lisa. Catherine nodded, and Calloway gently lifted Lisa from the wheelchair, cradling her carefully to avoid disrupting the IV lane's horn. I've got you, sweetheart, he assured her. Hold on tight. Lisa wrapped her arms around his neck as they entered the stairwell, Catherine carrying the IV bag, while Sanchez took a final look down the corridor before following them in. Hammer, Calloway spoke into his phone, which he'd switched to speaker mode. We're in the east stairwell, heading down to the basement. Where are you? 3rd floor, west stairwell, came the reply. Moving to intercept those 2 false orderlies now. Negative, Calloway ordered. Do not engage directly. Shadow and report only. We need to know if they have backup. As they descended, the sound of a door opening above them echoed in the stairwell. Footsteps, hurried and determined, began moving downward. Someone's following, Sanchez whispered, drawing her weapon. Keep going, Calloway urged Catherine, adjusting Lisa in his arms to free one hand, reaching beneath his cut to the small of his back, where a .45 was holstered, a weapon he was licensed to carry but had hoped not to need. They continued downward, the pursuing footsteps growing louder. As they rounded the landing between the 2nd and 1st floors, the door below them burst open, and Hammer Rodriguez emerged, his massive frame blocking the stairs. Cavalry's here, he announced, taking in the situation instantly. Doc and Bear are securing the basement level now. The relief was short-lived as the door above them slammed open, revealing a man in orderly scrubs, his hand reaching inside his uniform as he spotted them. Police, freeze, Sanchez shouted, her weapon aimed upward. Instead of complying, the man fired, the shot going wide as Hammer surged upward, tackling him against the wall. The gun clattered down the stairs as the two men struggled. Go! Go! Hammer shouted, pinning the assailant who was revealed to be Tyler Reed. Calloway didn't hesitate, hurrying down the remaining stairs with Lisa clinging tightly to him, her face buried against his shoulder. Catherine followed, her nurse's training keeping her focused despite the chaos. Sanchez remained briefly, covering Hammer until she was certain he had control of Reed, then rejoined the others. They burst through the basement level door to find Doc Murphy waiting, medical bag in hand as always, but now also holding what appeared to be a taser. Bears checking the perimeter, Doc reported. No sign of the second hostile yet. This way, Catherine directed, leading them through dimly lit corridors to a section of the basement that indeed seemed forgotten by time. Metal shelving lined the walls, filled with paper records and manila folders, a relic from the pre-digital age. At the end of a row stood a middle-aged woman with curly red hair, her eyes wide with concern. Janine, Catherine called softly, we need help. Janine took in the strange procession, the biker carrying a child, the armed detective, her friend Catherine and looking terrified, and simply nodded. Back office, she said, leading them further into the labyrinth of shelves to a small room with a desk, computer, and old couch. No one comes down here except me most days. Calloway gently set Lisa down on the couch while Catherine carefully arranged the IV. Doc immediately moved to check Lisa's vital signs with the precision of his military medic training. She's stable, he reported, pulse elevated, but that's to be expected under the circumstances. Sanchez was already on her radio, coordinating with hospital security and her backup. Suspect in custody on stairwell between floors 1 and 2, armed and dangerous. Proceed with caution, second suspect still at large. Calloway stepped out into the corridor where Bear Thompson now stood guard, his former police training evident in his stance and alertness. Hammer's got Reed secured, Bear reported quietly, but no sign of Blake yet. Ghost is sweeping the upper floors. He won't give up, Calloway said grimly, not until he completes his mission or determines the risk is too high. What's the play here, Frank? Bear asked. This is bigger than anything we've handled before. Professional killers, corrupt officials, a trafficking ring. We're just a bunch of old bikers. Calloway's weathered face set in determination. We're a bunch of old bikers who swore to protect that little girl. Nothing's changed. Inside the office, Lisa sat quietly on the couch, watching the adults with the wary eyes of a child who had learned too quickly that the world wasn't safe. Catherine sat beside her, arm protectively around her shoulders, while Janine brought bottles of water from a small refrigerator in the corner. How long do we need to stay here? Catherine asked as Sanchez re-entered the room. Until we've swept the entire hospital and confirmed it's secure, the detective replied. My team has Reed in custody. He's not talking yet, but having one of Crane's men caught in the act gives us leverage we didn't have before. What about Blake? Calloway asked from the doorway. No sign yet. He may have aborted when he saw Reed was compromised. Sanchez holstered her weapon. We'll find him. Lisa suddenly spoke up, her voice small but clear. The man who took me said there were other kids. He was talking on the phone about a delivery place in Kentucky. All eyes turned to her. Sanchez approached slowly, kneeling to be at eye level with the child. Lisa, did you hear any specific details? Any names of towns or places? Lisa's brow furrowed in concentration. He said something about the warehouse in Dawson, and the person on the phone said they were preparing for special clients coming to see the merchandise. The adults exchanged grim glances at the dehumanizing terminology. Dawson Springs, Calloway said, small town in Kentucky, about 3 hours north of here. You know it? Sanchez asked. Passed through many times on rides. Calloway's mind was already mapping routes, considering tactical approaches. Rural area, lots of abandoned industrial buildings since the coal industry declined. Perfect place to hide an operation like this. Sanchez was already on her phone, Irma. I need to contact the Kentucky State Police, get them to look into this. She stepped outside to make the call. Mr. Calloway? Lisa's voice drew his attention back to the couch. Are you going to help the other kids too? The simple question, asked with complete faith in his ability to rescue others as he'd rescued her, struck Calloway to his core. In her eyes, he wasn't an aging biker with bad knees and too many regrets. He was a protector, a guardian, someone who could make the monsters go away. Yes, Lisa, he answered with quiet certainty. We're going to help them too. Catherine squeezed her daughter's hand. The police will handle that, sweetheart. Mr. Calloway and his friends have already done so much. But Calloway and Doc exchanged knowing glances. This wasn't over for the Iron Eagles. Not by a long shot. Sanchez returned, her expression troubled. I've hit a wall. Kentucky State Police will look into any suspicious warehouses in Dawson Springs, but without specific evidence or an address, they can only do so much. And they're suggesting a full investigation will require warrants, which means judges, which means time that those kids don't have, Calloway finished, especially now that Crane knows his operation is compromised. There's more, Sanchez lowered her voice. I've been informed that Judge James Wilson has taken a sudden interest in Lisa's case. He's the senior judge in the district and has requested all files related to her kidnapping be transferred to his direct supervision due to the sensitive nature of the case. Is that normal procedure? Catherine asked. No, Sanchez said bluntly, it's not. And Wilson, he has shut down investigations connected to Crane before, citing insufficient evidence. Calloway's suspicions deepened. You're a corrupt official, I presume? I can't make accusations without proof, Sanchez replied carefully. But the timing is concerning. A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. Ghost Wilkins appeared in the doorway, his usually impassive face showing rare agitation. We've got a problem, he announced. Hospital administrator just arrived with 2 suits. They're saying all non-family visitors need to leave immediately by order of Judge Wilson. They've got papers, Sanchez cursed under her breath. He's moving fast, trying to isolate Lisa. Catherine's arms tightened around her daughter. They can't just take her, can they? No, Sanchez assured her, but they can remove her protection, make her vulnerable. Calloway's decision was immediate. We need to move her, now, not just to another part of the hospital. Out completely. That's against protocol, Sanchez objected. She's still a witness in protective custody. And how protected will she be when Crane's people come back with illegal documents signed by a corrupt judge? Calloway challenged. You said yourself you can't guarantee everyone in the department is clean. Sanchez's internal struggle was visible on her face. The conflict between following proper procedure and recognizing when the system itself might be compromised. I can't officially sanction removing her from the hospital, she said finally. I understand, Calloway nodded. But will you stop us? The detective held his gaze for a long moment before responding. I need to go upstairs and deal with those officials. It might take me some time to sort through their paperwork. Perhaps 30 minutes. I can't possibly monitor everything happening in the hospital during that time. The meaning was clear. She would provide them a window, nothing more. Catherine, Calloway turned to the mother, this has to be your decision. Lisa is your daughter. Catherine looked down at Lisa, then back at the assembled group. The bikers who had saved her daughter once already, the detective whose hands were tied by the very system she served, her friend Janine who watched with worried eyes. If we stay, can you guarantee my daughter will be safe? She asked Sanchez directly. The detective's hesitation spoke volumes. Then we go, Catherine decided, her voice finding new strength. But where, Tiki? The Iron Eagles have a clubhouse outside the city, Calloway explained. Secure compound, restricted access. We can protect her there while Sanchez continues the official investigation. I'll need to go home first, Catherine said practically. Get clothes, Lisa's medications, her comfort items. Too risky, Doc advised. Your home is the first place they'll watch once they realize you're gone. I can get things for you, Janine offered. I know where you keep your spare key. Just make me a list. As the logistics were quickly arranged, Lisa watched the adults with solemn understanding beyond her years. When there was a brief lull in the planning, she spoke up again. What about the other kids? She insisted. The ones in Kentucky. If we leave, who's going to help them? The question hung in the air, impossible to dismiss. Calloway knelt beside the couch, looking directly into Lisa's eyes. Some of us will protect you, he promised, and some of us will go find those other children. We won't forget them. Lisa studied his face, seeming to search for any sign of an adult's empty promise. Finding none, she nodded. Okay. Plan solidified rapidly. Bear and Doc would escort Catherine and Lisa to the clubhouse via a service exit in Bear's SUV. Hammer and Ghost would create a diversion at the main entrance to draw attention away from their departure. Calloway would coordinate with Sanchez on next steps for the investigation while maintaining plausible deniability for her involvement in their escape. As Catherine prepared Lisa for transport, removing the IV with professional care now that it was no longer necessary, Calloway stepped outside with his men for a final briefing. "This crosses a line," he acknowledged. "Once we do this, we're operating outside the law." "Wouldn't be the first time," Ghost remarked dryly. "The difference is we're not just protecting ourselves or the club. We're taking responsibility for a child, a witness in an active investigation." Calloway looked each man in the eye. "Anyone wants to step back, now's the time. No judgment." The Iron Eagles exchanged glances, decades of brotherhood allowing communication without words. It was Hammer who finally spoke for all of them. "That little girl in there asked about the other kids, the ones still in danger." His massive shoulders squared. "I couldn't look my reflection in the mirror if we walked away now." Bear nodded in agreement. "Systems failed these children already. Someone has to stand up." "Besides," Doc added with a grim smile, "we're too old to start worrying about consequences now." Calloway felt a surge of pride in these men he called brothers. Society might see them as obsolete relics, aging bikers clinging to outdated codes. But in this moment, they stood as the last line of defense for the most vulnerable. "Bear Doc, you're on protection detail at the clubhouse. Ghost, you'll come with me to Kentucky once we've secured Lisa's transfer. Hammer, I need you on intelligence. Find out everything you can about Crane, his operation, his weaknesses." "What about Reed?" Bear asked. "He's in custody now. Can Sanchez get him to talk?" "Doubtful," Calloway assessed. "Men like that are either too loyal or too afraid to betray their employers. But his arrest buys us time. Crane will be scrambling to assess the damage, regroup." As they finalized details, Detective Sanchez approached from the end of the corridor, her expression urgent. "Time's up," she announced quietly. "The administrator and Judge Wilson's representatives are demanding access to all areas of the hospital. They've got hospital security with them." "How long can you stall them?" Calloway asked. 10 minutes, maybe less." Sanchez handed him a small USB drive. "This contains everything I have on the investigation so far, including what little we know about Crane's operation. Officially, I'm giving you nothing. Unofficially," she let the sentence hang. Calloway pocketed the drive with a nod of understanding. "What will you tell them when they find Lisa gone?" "That I was upstairs dealing with their legal demands when the mother, exercising her parental rights, checked her medically stable daughter out of the hospital against medical advice." Sanchez's expression hardened. "It's not even a lie." Inside the office, Catherine had Lisa ready to go, the child now dressed in scrubs borrowed from Janine as a simple disguise. "Ready?" Bear asked gently, offering his massive hand to Lisa. The girl took it without hesitation, her other hand firmly in her mother's grasp. "Remember," Sanchez instructed, "once you're out that service door, you're on your own until you reach the clubhouse. I can't provide official protection." "We understand," Catherine said, her nurse's composure firmly in place despite the extraordinary circumstances. As Bear and Doc prepared to lead them out, Lisa suddenly broke free and rushed to Calloway, wrapping her arms around his waist in a fierce hug. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing me, for helping the other kids." Calloway's weathered hand gently patted her back, his throat unexpectedly tight. "You stay safe with Bear and Doc, you hear? They'll take good care of you until I get back." Lisa looked up at him, her young face showing the determination that had already saved her life once. "I will. And you'll come back, right? You promise?" "I promise," Calloway assured her, knowing full well the danger of such promises, but unable to deny her the comfort of certainty. With a final nod to his men, Calloway watched as Bear and Doc escorted Catherine and Lisa down the corridor toward the service exit, the small procession disappearing around a corner. The most vulnerable witness against Victor Crane was now under the protection of the Iron Eagles. Hammer and Ghost moved to execute their diversion at the main entrance, leaving Calloway and Sanchez alone in the corridor. "You know Crane won't stop," Sanchez said quietly. "Lisa can identify him, connect him directly to the trafficking operation." "I know," Calloway acknowledged. "That's why we need to bring down his entire operation before he can regroup. The warehouse in Dawson Springs is our best lead." "I'll work the official channels," Sanchez promised. But with Judge Wilson involved, everything will be scrutinized. Warrants delayed, evidence questioned. Then we'll have to find evidence too compelling to be ignored, Calloway said grimly, even by a corrupt judge. Sanchez studied him with professional assessment. What you're planning, it's dangerous. Not just physically, legally. You could be charged with interfering in an investigation, vigilantism, even kidnapping if Wilson twists it the right way. Calloway's weathered face showed no fear, only resolution. I've lived most of my life already, detective. Made my share of mistakes. But I've never regretted standing up for those who couldn't stand for themselves. He straightened to his full height. The bearing of the Marine officer he once was still evident, despite the decades since. Some things are worth the risk. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of raised voices, Hammer creating the promised diversion. Sanchez checked her watch. That's your cue. I need to get upstairs before they realize something's happening. She extended her hand, which Calloway shook firmly. Be careful. And Calloway, find those kids. We will, he promised, watching as she hurried away toward the commotion. Alone in the corridor, Frank Calloway took a moment to center himself for what was to come. At 62, he was about to lead his brothers into a confrontation with a powerful trafficking network, operating outside the law to deliver justice the system couldn't provide. The rational part of his brain acknowledged the madness of it. The warrior in him recognized it as perhaps the most important mission of his life. His phone vibrated with a text from Ghost. Bear reports package secure, en route to clubhouse. Hammer's diversion successful. Meet at exit C in 2 minutes. As Calloway moved through the basement corridors toward the rendezvous point, he thought of Lisa Mitchell's brave face, of her concern for the other children, even in the midst of her own trauma. He thought of Catherine's determination to protect her daughter at all costs. He thought of all the children still missing, including Jason Reynolds, waiting for someone to find them. The system had failed them. The powerful had betrayed them. The authorities were compromised. All that stood between these children and a lifetime of suffering was a group of aging bikers who still believed that fighting for what was right mattered, regardless of the cost. As he pushed through the exit door to find Ghost waiting with their motorcycles, Calloway felt a familiar calm settling over him. The same calm that had guided him through firefights in distant jungles and desert conflicts. Age might have slowed his reflexes, silvered his hair, and stiffened his joints, but it had done nothing to diminish his resolve. Kentucky? Ghost asked simply as Calloway mounted his Harley. Calloway nodded, starting the engine. Kentucky. We find that warehouse, document everything, get those kids out. And Crane? Calloway's eyes hardened as he looked northward, toward Dawson Springs and the children waiting for rescue. One battle at a time, brother. One battle at a time. The two motorcycles roared to life, pulling away from Memphis General Hospital as hospital security and Judge Wilson's representatives rushed through the front entrance, unaware that the witness they sought was already miles away, protected by men society had written off as irrelevant, men who were about to prove just how wrong that assessment was. In his penthouse office, Victor Crane received the call he'd been dreading. Reed captured, the Mitchell girl missing, along with her mother, the Iron Eagles involved. His manicured hand tightened around the crystal tumbler of bourbon until his knuckles whitened. Everything he'd built over decades, the respectable facade, the connections, the profitable underground network, all threatened by a child and a group of elderly bikers. Find them, he ordered into the phone. Whatever it takes, and move the merchandise from Dawson Springs immediately. We can't risk exposure. As he hung up, Crane moved to his window, staring out at the Memphis skyline he had helped shape through his philanthropic contributions and business investments. No one looking at this respected pillar of the community would imagine the darkness that funded his empire. No one, that is, except a brave 8-year-old girl and the unlikely guardians who had sworn to protect her. For the first time in years, Victor Crane felt something he'd thought himself immune to: fear. The road to Dawson Springs stretched before them, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through Kentucky's rolling landscape. Frank Calloway and Ghost Wilkins had been riding for nearly 3 hours, stopping only once for fuel and to check in with Bear at the clubhouse. The afternoon sun hung low in the western sky, casting long shadows across the road as they approached the small mining town. Bear reports all quiet at the clubhouse, Ghost said through their helmet communication system. Lisa and her mother are settled in. Doc's keeping watch. Calloway nodded, though Ghost couldn't see the gesture. The clubhouse, a fortified former farmhouse on 20 acres outside Memphis, had been the Iron Eagle's sanctuary for 15 years. With its reinforced doors, security cameras, and isolated location, it was as safe a haven as they could provide. But Calloway knew better than to underestimate Victor Crane. Men with his resources had ways of finding what they sought. And Hammer? Calloway asked, downshifting as they approached the Dawson Springs city limits. Deep diving into Crane's background, says he's found some interesting financial connections to shell companies that own property in the area. Any specific location for the warehouse? Nothing concrete yet, but he's narrowed it to the old industrial park on the east side. Most of those buildings have been abandoned since the mines closed in the 90s. Calloway processed this information as they rolled into the town proper, a small community that had clearly seen better days. Boarded-up storefronts lined the main street, interspersed with the occasional diner or dollar store still clinging to existence. The collapse of the coal industry had hollowed out many such towns across America's heartland, leaving them vulnerable to predators like Crane, who exploited their desperation. We'll need to do reconnaissance, Calloway decided, pulling into the parking lot of a roadside motel that had seen its prime during the Nixon administration. Check in here, establish our cover, then scout the industrial area after dark. Ghost nodded, dismounting from his Harley with the fluid grace that had earned him his nickname. Despite being 56, he moved with the silent precision that had made him an exceptional scout in his military days. What's our story? He asked quietly as they collected their minimal luggage. Veterans Motorcycle Association, documenting historic sites related to labor struggles in coal country, Calloway replied. Gives us reason to ask questions, take photos, wander around abandoned industrial areas. It was a cover that would hold up to casual scrutiny, close enough to their actual identities to be believable, vague enough to avoid specific questions. They checked into adjacent rooms, paid cash, and immediately established their temporary base of operations in Calloway's room. Ghost unfolded a local map acquired at a gas station on their way into town, spreading it on the bed. Hammer sent coordinates for 3 potential locations within the industrial park, all owned by shell companies with financial ties to Crane's investment firm. Calloway studied the map, his tactical mind evaluating approaches, sight lines, potential security measures. We'll do drive-bys first, look for signs of occupation, fresh tire tracks, security cameras, lights at night. As Ghost marked the locations on the map, Calloway's phone vibrated. Detective Sanchez. Calloway, he answered. Where are you? Her voice was tense, professional. Kentucky, looking into Lisa's information about the warehouse. A brief pause. I can't know that. Officially. Understood. Why are you calling? Reed broke, partially. With the right pressure, he confirmed there is a holding facility in Dawson Springs, but claims he doesn't know the exact location. Says kids are processed there before being moved to private clients. Calloway's jaw tightened. Processing was a clinical term for something unspeakable when applied to children. There's more, Sanchez continued. Judge Wilson has issued a formal order for Lisa Mitchell to be placed in temporary protective custody with child services, citing concerns about her current environment. Catherine Mitchell's parental judgment is being questioned due to erratic behavior following traumatic events. They're trying to get legal control of Lisa, Calloway translated. Isolate her. Yes, and my hands are tied. It's a lawful order from a senior judge. My captain has instructed me to locate the Mitchells and enforce the order immediately. Are you going to? Another pause, longer this time. I'm pursuing multiple leads as diligently as possible. Some may take considerable time to exhaust. Calloway understood her meaning. She was buying them time, stretching her professional ethics to their limit without breaking them entirely. We need evidence, Calloway said. Something so irrefutable, even Wilson can't make it disappear. Be careful, Frank, Sanchez warned. Crane has connections everywhere, and he's desperate now. That makes him more dangerous. After ending the call, Calloway updated Ghost on the developments. The quiet man absorbed the information with the impassivity that had served him well in countless hostile situations. Wilson's move changes our timeline, Ghost observed. We don't have the luxury of extended surveillance. No, Calloway agreed grimly. We need to locate those children tonight. As darkness fell over Dawson Springs, the two Iron Eagles exchanged their distinctive leather cuts for nondescript dark clothing, loaded a bag with essential gear, flashlights, bolt cutters, first aid supplies, cameras with night vision capability, and headed out in a rented SUV rather than their conspicuous motorcycles. The industrial park sat on the eastern edge of town like a monument to economic collapse. Massive structures of corrugated metal and concrete stood in varying states of decay, surrounded by chain-link fencing long since compromised by scavengers and vandals. Most buildings were dark, their windows broken, their purposes forgotten. But as Calloway drove slowly along the perimeter road, Ghost pointed to a structure set back from the others. There, Building C. Unlike its neighbors, this warehouse showed subtle signs of maintenance. The fence surrounding it was intact, topped with new razor wire. The windows were covered rather than broken. And most tellingly, a modern security camera was mounted at the entrance gate, its red light blinking steadily in the darkness. That's our target, Calloway confirmed, driving past without slowing to avoid triggering suspicion. Let's find a vantage point. They parked the SUV in the shadows of an abandoned loading dock and proceeded on foot, using the decaying industrial landscape as cover. Ghost moved ahead, his scouting instincts guiding him through the darkness with minimal sound, while Calloway followed with the steady patience of a seasoned commander. From a concealed position atop a neighboring building, they observed the warehouse for nearly an hour, noting the patterns of the exterior security, cameras covering all approaches, motion-activated lighting, a keypad entry system at the main door. Most importantly, they counted 2 guards patrolling the perimeter, armed with what appeared to be handguns and radios. Professional setup, Ghost whispered. Not local talent. Calloway nodded. This was no amateur operation. The level of security confirmed they'd found Crane's facility, but it also meant getting inside would be challenging. As they continued their surveillance, a panel truck approached the warehouse, slowing at the gate. The driver entered a code, and the gate slid open electronically. Calloway quickly photographed the vehicle, capturing its license plate as it entered the compound. Delivery or pickup? Ghost wondered aloud. Let's find out, Calloway replied, already moving toward a blind spot in the camera coverage that they'd identified. Using the truck's arrival as distraction, they made their way closer to the warehouse, positioning themselves near an emergency exit on the building's west side. The concrete loading dock provided cover as they watched the truck back up to the main entrance. 2 men emerged from the warehouse to meet the truck. Even from a distance, Calloway recognized one of them, Marcus Blake, the cleaner who had eluded capture at the hospital. The other was unfamiliar, heavier set, carrying himself with the arrogant confidence of someone in charge. The truck's rear doors opened, and Calloway felt his blood run cold. A line of children, no more than 6 or 7 in total, emerged under escort. They ranged in age from perhaps 8 to 14, boys and girls, moving with the shuffling compliance of the thoroughly intimidated. Each wore identical gray sweatpants and sweatshirts. No shoes despite the cool October night. They're moving them, Ghost whispered, his normally impassive voice tight with anger. Just like Sanchez said. Calloway was already documenting everything. The camera's night vision capturing images that would turn any decent person's stomach. Children being transferred like inventory, numbered tags around their necks, blank expressions of fear and resignation on their young faces. The heavy-set man checked something on a clipboard, then directed the children into the warehouse. Blake followed, scanning the perimeter with the heightened awareness of someone who knew they were being hunted. We need to get inside, Calloway decided, now while they're distracted with the transfer. Ghost nodded grimly. Through the emergency exit, security systems always have vulnerabilities during active operations. They made their way to the emergency door, finding it equipped with an alarm system that would normally trigger if opened. But Ghost, who had worked security systems after leaving the military, quickly identified the external junction box. Standard commercial setup, he murmured, working with tools from their bag. Designed to prevent casual intrusion, not determined entry. Within minutes, he had bypassed the alarm on this particular door, allowing them to enter without alerting the entire facility. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a dimly lit corridor that smelled of industrial cleaner and something more disturbing, fear. Calloway took point, moving with the discipline of his Marine training. They passed storage rooms filled with supplies, clothing in children's sizes, toiletries, bedding, all neatly organized with the efficiency of a business operation, which Calloway reminded himself with disgust was exactly what this was. Voices echoed from somewhere ahead, and they paused, listening intently. The heavy-set man was speaking, his tone bureaucratic, emotionless. The two oldest go to the client in New York. Special request for matched siblings. The younger four are for the distribution center in Atlanta. Standard processing applies. Blake's response was inaudible, but the heavy-set man continued. Crane wants everything cleared out by morning. Too much heat from the Memphis situation. Calloway and Ghost exchanged glances. The Memphis situation could only refer to Lisa's escape and Reed's capture. They were witnessing the dismantling of this operation in real time. Following the voices led them to an observation window, looking into what appeared to be a processing room. Inside, the children from the truck stood in a line as two workers in medical scrubs examined them, checking teeth, eyes, taking measurements. The clinical detachment of the process made it all the more horrifying. Documentation, Calloway whispered, raising the camera. The evidence they captured would be irrefutable. Faces of the children, the workers, the systematic nature of the abuse. As they continued their covert exploration of the facility, they found sleeping quarters, sparse rooms with multiple beds, bathroom facilities with no privacy, a dining area with institutional tables. Everything designed for efficiency, nothing for comfort or dignity. In an office area, Ghost discovered files, paper records of children processed through the facility over the past year. Each file contained photos, medical information, and disturbingly, client preferences and prices. There must be records of dozens of children here, Ghost said quietly, using his phone to photograph pages rapidly, including, he stopped, holding up a file, Jason Reynolds. When Calloway looked at the photo clipped to the file, a 10-year-old boy with solemn eyes, reported missing from Memphis 3 months earlier. Lisa had mentioned him specifically. Is he still here? Calloway asked urgently. Ghost checked the file. Last notation indicates holding for special client, dated 3 days ago. They needed to find him, find all the children still in the facility, but they also needed to complete their documentation. Evidence that would not only free these children, but bring down Crane's entire operation. A sudden commotion from the main area interrupted their search. Raised voices, hurried footsteps. Their presence had been discovered. Lock it down now, Blake's voice commanded. We have intruders. Alarms blared throughout the facility, and the sound of security doors engaging echoed through the corridors. Calloway and Ghost immediately shifted to extraction mode, gathering the files they'd been documenting and moving toward their entry point. The children, Ghost said, hesitating. We can't leave them. Calloway made the hardest tactical decision of his life. We can't extract them all, not against armed opposition. Our priority has to be getting this evidence out. It's their best chance. Ghost knew he was right, but the knowledge didn't ease the burden. They moved efficiently toward the emergency exit, but found their path blocked by a security gate that had automatically deployed with the alarm. Alternate route, Calloway directed, leading them down a service corridor that, according to the building layout they'd observed, should connect to a loading area. They encountered a lone guard rushing toward the commotion. Ghost disabled him with silent efficiency, a chokehold that rendered the man unconscious without permanent injury. They appropriated his radio, listening to the security chatter as they navigated the increasingly hostile environment. 2 intruders, possibly armed. Secure all assets in the safe room. Blake wants them alive if possible. The assets could only be the children. At least they were being moved to a centralized location rather than scattered throughout the facility. That would help law enforcement when they arrived, if Calloway and Ghost could get out with their evidence. They reached the loading area just as Blake and 2 guards entered from the opposite side. There was an instant of mutual recognition before Blake shouted, "There! Take them down!" Decades of combat training took over. Calloway and Ghost split, using shipping crates as cover as the guards opened fire. The confined space amplified the gunshots to deafening levels. Calloway returned fire with controlled precision, not aiming to kill but to disable, and create chaos. Ghost moved laterally, using his smaller frame and exceptional agility to flank one of the guards, taking him down with a tackle that sent both crashing into metal shelving. Blake directed his fire at Calloway, who felt a bullet graze his left arm as he rolled for better cover. The sting of torn flesh was familiar, almost nostalgic in its way, the body's reminder that it was mortal, that each fight could be the last. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into, old man," Blake shouted during a brief lull in the gunfire. "This operation has protection at the highest levels." "That's supposed to scare me?" Calloway called back, checking his weapon. "I've been fighting corrupt systems my whole life." The firefight resumed with renewed intensity. Ghost had neutralized his opponent and was working his way toward an exterior door, creating an extraction route. Calloway provided covering fire, the familiar rhythm of combat flowing through him like muscle memory. "Frank, doors open!" Ghost called from across the loading bay. "Time to go!" Calloway made a final suppressing burst toward Blake's position, then ran toward the exit Ghost had secured. Outside air rushed in, cool, clean, a promise of escape. But as Calloway neared the doorway, a child's cry echoed from somewhere deeper in the facility. He faltered for just an instant, an old warrior's hesitation that nearly proved fatal. Blake emerged from cover, weapon raised for a clear shot at Calloway's back. "Frank, down!" Ghost shouted. Calloway dropped instinctively as Ghost fired over him, the bullet catching Blake in the shoulder, spinning him backward. It wasn't a killing shot, but it bought them the seconds they needed. Calloway scrambled to his feet and through the door, Ghost following and securing it behind them. They ran through the darkness toward their hidden vehicle, the wail of sirens in the distance indicating that someone, perhaps the facility's security, perhaps an alert civilian, had reported the gunfire. Either way, law enforcement was inbound. "You're hit," Ghost noted as they reached the SUV, nodding toward Calloway's bleeding arm. "Grace potato, nothing vital." Calloway slid behind the wheel, ignoring the burning pain. "We need to clear the area before police establish a perimeter." They drove away from the industrial park via a secondary access road, lights off until they reached the main highway. By then, multiple police cruisers were speeding in the opposite direction, toward the warehouse and the chaos they'd left behind. "Think Blake will destroy the evidence before they arrive?" Ghost asked, checking the digital files on his phone to confirm they'd transferred properly. "Some of it, maybe," Calloway conceded, "but not the children. Too many to move quickly, and murder would only escalate the charges if they are caught. Most likely they'll try to bluff their way through, claim it's a legitimate care facility. Until the children start talking." "Exactly." They drove in tense silence back to the motel, watching for pursuit, but seeing none. The immediate priority was treating Calloway's wound, transmitting their evidence to secure locations, and contacting Sanchez. In the motel room, Ghost efficiently cleaned and bandaged Calloway's arm. The bullet had carved a furrow through the outer flesh without damaging muscle or bone. Painful but not debilitating. The real pain was knowing they'd had to leave those children behind, hoping that the system would, for once, work as intended. Calloway used an encrypted connection Hammer had set up to transmit the photographic evidence to multiple recipients: Sanchez, a trusted journalist contact, and a secure cloud storage accessible to the Iron Eagles. No single point of failure. No way for Crane to track and eliminate all copies. "Sanchez," Calloway said when the detective answered his call, voice low despite the privacy of the motel room. "We found it, documented everything. Children being processed for transportation, records of transactions, faces of personnel, including Blake." "My God," Sanchez breathed. "You actually did it. Where are you now?" "Secure location. We had to exit under fire. Local police are responding to the warehouse now, but they won't know what they're walking into. I'll contact the Kentucky State Police, have them take over from local jurisdiction. With your evidence, we can get federal involvement too. FBI anti-trafficking unit." "What about Judge Wilson? Can he block this?" Sanchez's voice hardened. "Not anymore. Your documentation places this firmly in federal jurisdiction. Wilson's influence is significant, but not unlimited. And with evidence this explosive, attempting to suppress it would only implicate him further." "There's a boy there," Calloway said, thinking of the file they'd found. "Jason Reynolds, missing from Memphis for 3 months. Lisa mentioned him specifically. I'll make sure they prioritize finding him." Sanchez promised. Frank, what you've done, it's going to save lives. But it also puts an even bigger target on your backs. Crane will be desperate now. Let him come, Calloway replied, the warrior in him rising to the surface. I've been fighting predators my whole life. I'm too old to stop now. After ending the call, Calloway checked in with Bear at the clubhouse. The situation there remained secure, though Bear reported increased police patrols in the vicinity, likely Sanchez's colleagues searching for Lisa and Catherine in response to Judge Wilson's order. We're heading back at first light, Calloway decided, exhaustion finally catching up with him as the adrenaline ebbed. Keep everything locked down until we arrive. Sleep came in fitful bursts, his dreams filled with the faces of the children he'd seen, their empty eyes, their resigned postures. In one particularly vivid sequence, they transformed into the Vietnamese children he'd failed to save decades earlier, calling his name, reaching out with small hands that dissolved into smoke before he could grasp them. He woke before dawn, sweat-soaked and resolved. Ghost was already up, his disciplined nature requiring minimal rest. They packed silently, checked out of the motel, and were on their motorcycles as the first light broke over the Kentucky horizon. The ride back to Memphis was tense, both men alert for pursuit or ambush. Calloway knew that Crane, now exposed, would be calculating his options. Men like him didn't surrender power willingly. They fought, they leveraged corrupt connections, they eliminated threats. And the Iron Eagles, with their protection of Lisa and their raid on the warehouse, had positioned themselves as the primary threat to Crane's freedom and fortune. They were 2 hours from Memphis when Hammer called. Frank, we've got movement. His voice crackled through the helmet communication. Judge Wilson has issued arrest warrants for you and Ghost. Charges include trespassing, assault, interfering with a police investigation, and child endangerment. Child endangerment, Calloway repeated incredulously, claiming you've endangered Lisa by removing her from proper medical care and official protection. Hammer's disgust was evident. It's a setup, obviously. Any officer who brings you in would be delivering you straight to Crane. What about Sanchez, the evidence from the warehouse? She's fighting the internal battle, but cautiously. Kentucky State Police raided the warehouse at dawn, found 18 children and extensive evidence of trafficking. It's all over the news, but no mention of how the authorities were tipped off. Sanchez is protecting your involvement. And Crane? No warrants yet. His lawyers are probably working overtime, and his political connections are running interference. But with federal agencies involved now, his options are narrowing. Calloway processed this information, making tactical adjustments. We need to secure Lisa somewhere beyond Wilson's jurisdiction. The clubhouse is too obvious now. Already on it, Hammer assured him. Bear and Doc are moving the Mitchells to our backup location in Arkansas. Old hunting cabin, off-grid, untraceable to the club. Good. Ghost and I will rendezvous with them there. Calloway paused, then asked the question weighing on him. How's Lisa holding up? Hammer's voice softened slightly. Kid's tougher than most adults I know. She's worried about you, though. Made Bear promise to call when you were safe. Something tightened in Calloway's chest, an unfamiliar sensation he eventually recognized as paternal protectiveness. He'd failed to save his own daughter from her demons, had watched her spiral into addiction that eventually took her life. That loss had hollowed him out for years. Now somehow, this brave child he barely knew had awakened something he'd thought long dead. The miles passed beneath their wheels as they adjusted their route to avoid main highways where law enforcement might be watching for them. It added time to their journey but reduced the risk of interception. By mid-afternoon, they had crossed into Arkansas and were approaching the remote cabin that served as the Iron Eagle's emergency fallback location. The cabin sat deep in the Ozark National Forest, accessible only by a dirt track that required high-clearance vehicles or, in their case, motorcycles capable of off-road travel. No electricity connected it to the grid, no plumbing tied it to municipal systems. Solar panels and a generator provided power, a well-supplied water, and satellite technology, installed by Hammer during his brief foray into private security work, offered untraceable communication. As they approached through the dense forest, Bear's massive figure emerged from the cabin's porch, rifle held casually but ready. He recognized them immediately, lowering the weapon and raising a hand in greeting. Perimeter secure, he reported as they dismounted, muscles stiff from the long ride. No signs of surveillance or tracking. Docks inside with the Mitchells. The cabin's interior was rustic but functional. 2 bedrooms, a main living area with a wood stove, a small kitchen with propane appliances. Catherine Mitchell sat at the rough-hewn dining table, helping Lisa with what appeared to be schoolwork, despite their extraordinary circumstances. Doc Murphy was by the window, his medical bag open as he sorted supplies. Lisa looked up as they entered, her face brightening immediately. "Mr. Calloway! Ghost! You're back!" She rushed toward them, stopping short when she noticed the bandage visible beneath Calloway's torn sleeve. "You're hurt." "Just a scratch," Calloway assured her, kneeling to her level despite the protest from his knees. "Nothing serious." Lisa studied his face with that direct, assessing gaze that seemed too mature for her years. "Did you find the other kids? Jason and the others?" Calloway nodded, honesty being the only acceptable currency with this child who had already endured so much deception. "We did. The police have them now. They're safe." Relief washed over her face, followed immediately by concern. "What about the bad men? Did they get away?" "Some of them are in custody," Calloway explained carefully. "Others, including Mr. Crane, are still being investigated. But the important thing is, they can't hurt those children anymore." Catherine joined them, her face showing the strain of their situation but her composure intact. "Detective Sanchez called on the secure line. She told us what you found, what you did." Her voice wavered slightly. "Thank you doesn't seem adequate." "No thanks needed," Ghost said quietly, one of his rare direct communications. "It's what needed doing." They gathered around the cabin's main room as Calloway and Ghost recounted their mission, edited appropriately for Lisa's presence. The discovery of the warehouse, the documentation of the trafficking operation, the confirmation that Crane was directly involved, the rescue of the children by law enforcement, all parts of a story that was still unfolding. "What happens now?" Catherine asked, the practical nurse asserting herself through the frightened mother. "How long do we need to hide?" It was Bear who answered, his former police perspective valuable. "Judge Wilson's warrants are problematic, but limited to Tennessee jurisdiction. Federal authorities are taking over the investigation based on the interstate nature of the trafficking. Once they have Crane in custody, Wilson's position becomes untenable." "And if they don't get Crane?" Catherine pressed. The Iron Eagles exchanged glances, a silent communication born of decades of brotherhood. "We'll cross that bridge if we come to it," Calloway said finally. "For now, you and Lisa stay here, protected. We maintain operational security and monitor developments through Sanchez and our other channels." As the adults continued discussing strategy, Lisa tugged at Calloway's sleeve, drawing him slightly aside. "Mr. Calloway, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." Her young face was solemn, troubled. "The man who took me, he said I was special because I looked like pictures. What did that mean?" Calloway's heart sank. It was a question he'd hoped to avoid, the darkest aspect of Crane's operation that no child should have to understand. But Lisa had earned honesty through her courage. "Sometimes," he began carefully, "bad people have specific preferences for the children they want to hurt. They might ask for certain looks or ages. It's not about you, Lisa. It's about their sickness." Lisa absorbed this, her young mind grappling with concepts no child should have to confront. "So there are people who asked for kids who look like me?" "Yes," Calloway admitted, "but they will never get near you. I promise you that." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer and his promise. Then, with the resilience that had continually astonished him, she changed the subject. "Mom says you have a motorcycle club. Do you have a clubhouse with a real flag and everything?" The conversation shifted to lighter topics: the Iron Eagles' history, their community service projects, their annual toy drive for children's hospitals. Lisa listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed a sharp mind beneath her traumatized exterior. She was healing, Calloway realized. Despite everything, she was finding her way back to being a child. As evening fell, Catherine prepared a simple meal using the cabin supplies. The domesticity of the scene, a mother cooking, a child setting the table, men discussing the day's events, created a surreal contrast with the circumstances that had brought them together. Yet there was something fundamentally right about it too, Calloway thought. Protection of the vulnerable was the most basic function of community, of family. After dinner, as Lisa worked on a drawing at the table and Catherine helped Doc inventory medical supplies, Calloway stepped onto the cabin's porch for a moment of solitude. The forest surrounded them, ancient and indifferent to human concerns, stars emerging in the clear Arkansas sky above the canopy. Bear joined him, offering a cup of coffee that probably contained a medicinal splash of bourbon. "Arm bothering you?" "Not enough to matter," Calloway replied, accepting the cup gratefully. "I've had worse." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, two old warriors who no longer needed words to communicate the essentials. "She's something special, that kid," Bear observed finally. "Got more guts than most grown men I've known." "She does," Calloway agreed, thinking of Lisa's concern for other children even in the midst of her own trauma, her direct questions, her resilience. "Makes you wonder what she'll accomplish when she grows up." "If we make sure she gets the chance," Bear added soberly. Calloway's phone vibrated, interrupting their contemplation. Hammer. "Got news," Hammer said without preamble when Calloway answered. "Crane's running. Private jet filed a flight plan for Mexico City, scheduled departure in 2 hours from a private airfield outside Memphis." "Sanchez know?" "She does, but she's hitting walls. Crane's lawyers have filed motions challenging the evidence, claiming a legal search and seizure since there was no warrant for the warehouse raid. They're muddying the waters, buying time for him to escape." Calloway's jaw tightened. He can't be allowed to disappear. Too many lives destroyed, too many children traumatized. Justice has to be served. "That's not all," Hammer continued grimly. "Judge Wilson signed release orders for both Blake and Reed pending further investigation. They're back on the street as of an hour ago." "Crane's cleaning house," Calloway concluded, "getting his key people out before he disappears." "Looks that way. Sanchez is trying to get federal agents to the airfield to intercept him, but with the legal challenges in play, they're proceeding cautiously. Might not move fast enough." After ending the call, Calloway briefed Bear on the developments. The former police officer's expression darkened with each detail. "System's failing again," Bear growled. "Just like it always does when the wealthy and connected are involved." Calloway stared into the darkness beyond the cabin, weighing options, considering risks. The responsible course would be to stay with Lisa and Catherine, maintain their protection while the legal system worked, however imperfectly, to bring Crane to justice. But if Crane escaped to Mexico, disappeared into a network of wealth and corruption beyond U.S. jurisdiction, what justice would there be for Lisa, for Jason Reynolds, for all the children whose lives had been forever altered by his operation? His decision crystallized with the clarity that had guided him through combat zones and life-or-death situations for over 40 years. "Bear, you and Doc stay with the Mitchells. Ghost, Hammer, and I will intercept Crane before he flies." Bear's expression showed concern, but not surprise. "Frank, you've already got warrants out for you in Tennessee. This would be walking straight into their jurisdiction, straight into a trap." "Maybe," Calloway acknowledged, "but sometimes the right thing and the safe thing aren't the same." Their conversation was interrupted by the cabin door opening. Lisa stood there in pajamas Catherine had managed to acquire, her hair damp from a recent bath, her young face serious. "You're going after the bad man, aren't you?" she asked without preamble. Calloway exchanged a glance with Bear, then knelt to Lisa's level despite the protest from his knees. "Yes, he's trying to run away, escape punishment for what he's done." Lisa nodded, processing this information with her characteristic directness. "Will you come back?" The question carried echoes of his promise in the hospital, a child's need for certainty in a world that had proven terrifyingly uncertain. Calloway wanted to offer that certainty, to promise his return, but the warrior in him knew better than to make promises he might not be able to keep. "I'll do everything in my power to come back," he said instead, offering the most honest assurance he could. Lisa studied his face, then stepped forward and hugged him fiercely. "Be careful, the other kids need you too." Calloway's arms encircled her small frame gently, his weathered heart expanding in his chest. "I will, sweetheart. You be good for Bear and Doc while I'm gone." As Lisa returned inside, Bear placed a heavy hand on Calloway's shoulder. "You know what you're riding into." It wasn't a question. "I do," Calloway confirmed. Crane's desperate, cornered. Wilson's compromised. Law enforcement is hamstrung by legal technicalities and jurisdictional disputes. He straightened to his full height, the Marine officer's bearing returning. Sometimes justice needs a direct approach. Bear nodded slowly. I'll contact Hammer, have him meet you en route. Ghost too? Ghost stays with you, Calloway decided. 4 Iron Eagles to protect Lisa and Catherine, 2 to intercept Crane. Best tactical distribution of our resources. The decision made, Calloway gathered his minimal possessions, checked his weapon, and prepared for the final confrontation with Victor Crane. Bear briefed Catherine on the development while Calloway said goodbye to Lisa, promising to call as soon as it was safe to do so. The night had fully descended when Calloway mounted his motorcycle, the engine's rumble echoing through the forest clearing. Bear stood on the cabin porch, Ghost a silent sentinel beside him, both men offering the Iron Eagle's traditional farewell, a closed fist pressed to the heart, then extended forward. Calloway returned the gesture, then turned his Harley toward the dirt track that would lead him back to the highway, back to Memphis, back to the final chapter of a story that had begun with a little girl's desperate plea for help at a gas station in the middle of the night. Justice was waiting, and Frank Calloway had never been one to make justice wait.